You go to the underworld when your life falls apart. That's what it means. And so when you see these stories of the hero, you know, journeying to unknown lands of terror and danger, that's what happens to you. It happens to you all the time. You know, you're in this little safe space like the Hobbit in the Shire, and then, you know, there's a great evil brewing somewhere and you can no longer ignore it, so off you go into the land of terror and uncertainty. And better to go on purpose than accidentally, that's for sure, because at least you can be prepared. And we also know that if you're going to face a threat, if you face it voluntarily, what happens is your body activates itself for exploration and mastery. But if you face it involuntarily, same size threat, then you revert to prey mode. And you're frozen, and that's way more stressful. It's way harder on your body, and so it's better to keep your eye open and watch for emergent threats, because you all know, you know, what you're not doing quite right and where your life is likely to unravel. You all have a sense of that, and the best thing to do is to not ignore that, to pay attention to it, to watch it, and to take corrective action early, and then, you know, you stay on top of things, and things. Your little trip to the underworld might be a few minutes long instead of a catastrophe that produces post-traumatic stress disorder, knocks you out for 4 or 5 years, and maybe you never recover. So, and that's, you know, that's what these kind of symbolic representations mean. Those are states of being that indicate being devoured, and you can be devoured by your own unconscious. Jesus, that happens all the time. What does that mean? Well, you know, and it's an autonomous thing in some sense, you know, like if you get depressed or if you get really anxious, you don't have any control over that. It's like it sweeps up over you and pulls you down. Why down? Well, down is where you go when you're sad. You don't go up. Man, I'm up today. Oh, that's too bad. No, it's man, I'm down today. And well, that's partly this, and it's partly because this is subordinate, and it's partly because down is closer to the ground and farther from the sky. Like there's all sorts of reasons you're feeling down rather than up. Up is where you're aiming, right? You aim up, you don't aim down. Well, the reason those phrases make sense is because they're locked deeply into this underlying structure of imagination. And well, those are the archetypal structures according to Jung. And I think that he's, as far as I can tell, he's dead accurate, and I think we understand the biology of such things much better than we did. So there's more representations. She's quite the friendly creature. That's Kelly. I like this representation better. Those are heads, by the way, and hands. So she sort of represents, well, very complex things. She represents death. She represents transformation. In this, I really like this representation. I think it's brilliant. So imagine that what the people were doing who formulated these representations, what they were trying to do was to make a representation of the domain of threat itself, right? So that they could deal with the idea that, because we can say threat. Well, what the hell does that mean? Well, threat is the category of all threatening things. And so then you can think about threat, and you can think about threat across all those individual instances, and maybe you can figure out how to deal with threat, right? What's the best way to be in the world so that you most effectively deal with threat? Well, that's sort of like, apart from how do you deal with pain, that's sort of like the ultimate question of human beings. Do you want to be terrified? No. So you want to be in danger? No. So like you better figure out how to deal with threat. So first of all, you have to conceptualize it. So we'll take a look at this representation. So that's Kelly. Her hair is on fire. Well, fire, you know, that's a numinous phenomena, dangerous but transformative. She's wearing a headdress of skulls. She has a weapon in this hand, and she has a tiger's tongue. She often has a snake around her waist. None of these do, but she often does. But in this case, then that's because, you know, it's a snake. We've already covered that. Well, these things that look like snakes here aren't. You notice how her belly is concave? Well, it's because she's just given birth to this unfortunate person that she happens to be standing on, and she's eating him intestines first. and that's a fire ring which he is in, and then it's got skulls on the inside of it. It's like, what's that supposed to do? Well, partly it's supposed to represent that which terrifies you. It's like, yeah, fair enough, man, because I don't imagine you saw all those things in there before I explained them, but someone who was familiar with that image would know what it meant. It's like some poor artist was sitting there thinking, well, how do I represent destruction? And it's like, bang, whoa, okay, we'll put that down and then we won't look at it again. So, and then what do you do with this? You make sacrifices to it. And you think, well, that's kind of primitive. You know, first of all, well, that doesn't really exist. Well, it does if it's an amalgam of threat symbols, I can tell you that. It exists, that's for sure. So it exists as an abstraction, if nothing else. Do you offer it sacrifices? Well, what the hell do you think you do? What are you doing in class? Why aren't you like drinking vodka and snorting cocaine? You know, because you could be doing that. Instead, here you are, listening to me, you know, slaving away in university. You're young. It's like, really? You've got nothing better to do than sit there? You know, well, what you're willing to forego today's pleasure for tomorrow's advantage. And that's what sacrifice is. And human beings discovered that dramatically first, you know, like we were apes, for God's sake. We didn't just leap up and think, oh, we better save for tomorrow. You know, it took thousands of years for that idea to emerge. And it emerged in dramatic form. And it was sort of like, well, society is sort of like a god. No, they weren't thinking this through. It was like, if you're going to represent society, well, it's like this masculine god that's always judging the hell out of you, that's everywhere all at the same time. It's like, yeah, that's true, absolutely. And what do you have to do with it? Well, you have to give it what it wants. Why do you have to give it what it wants? Because it'll crush you if you don't. And that's exactly right. And if you're lucky and you give it the right sacrifice, then it'll smile on you and you get to have a good life. And that was the major discovery of mankind, man. That was a killer discovery. It was like the discovery of the future. You know, we discovered the future as a place. And it was a place that you could bargain with. You can bargain with the future. Wow, that's just, what an idea that is. You know, it's so unlikely. Well, how do you bargain with the future? Well, you give it what it wants. And, you know, some of that's you maintain your social relationship, and, you know, you make yourself useful to other people, and you shape yourself so that you can cooperate with people, and you don't act impulsively, and maybe you squirrel something away for the next harvest, even if you're hungry, and, you know, and then the future isn't hell. And you make the proper sacrifices. And so if you sacrifice to Kelly, then she turns into her opposite and showers benevolence on you. And that's Mother Nature, right? It's like, look out for Mother Nature, man. You know, 2 weeks out in the bush right now and you're dead. And it's not pleasant. And then if it's the spring, you last longer. But the bugs eat you. And so that's not very fun either. So nature, you know, it's bent on your destruction. But if you treat it properly and carefully and make the right sacrifices, then maybe one of her trees will offer you some fruit. And that would be okay. And so believe me, lots of people died trying to figure that out.